당한서 그지 당념 당한저기 균의 맹아 둔유권에 다 전주심결로 장발라 전주심께발라 네 유튜브에로 공부를 다 유튜브 공야데 마시 진진 진소 이용한 잠바 니지 첨보 되네 라삼 남다 세력 공야디 디투크리스 디곰 세베줄라 되네 전주심 자탐지게 되네 산조고 바토버쇼 세베 전주심 계디 두스키고레스 디나네 당보 냠는지디 심전탐제랑게 마르시아바디 공야 장록 장고고레 디 장와라 녀레 나 저게 당념대 장고레 심전을 당념 장고레 세직 뜻이 다 당념 냠는 제발랑 아주 당념 아주길에 셈디 녀링이 시부시요 반자 가실라 가와나 가실라 미가와 아니 가실라 가와 가실라 아직 가야 마삼바디니게 녀링이 요바 인자 나 저게 심전탐제라는 셈 찍바다와데 장고고레 사실 녀링 매와서 고레세 다 녀링 매와서 와라 당념 고말라 당보 간스 고주고레라나 당보 고주야 돼 간저게 바르메 셈전 라리아 세딜리아 판녀가야 메디긴 셈전 질레 미제 안 당념 고고레스 지자 디네 자당아서 디네 아주 지게 당아 세딜리아 당념 바르메 셈전 갱고로 가시질레 미제 아니 도스제는 지당뇨 고미하디 검나디 삼다나디 아주 어시에 살아와라 다다시에디 당아다 바르메심제레 미네 당뇨 곰 체위제라 되네 아니 랑기 닝이 초라 미제 당뇨 곰 고레스테 도스제는 곰 고레체지 안다 되네 마 시에디 당아주 닝이 초라 미네 당뇨 곰나디 디고셔야지
Good evening. Last week we started to look at in detail on the meditation of impartiality. Impartiality, you remember, is the essential prerequisite to be cultivated in order for one to be able to cultivate the 6 causes that lead to the one result of the generation of bodhicitta. So those 6 causes, as you'll well remember, are first to see all beings as having been one's mother, to reflect on their kindness, to generate a great wish to repay that kindness, and on that basis to cultivate love and compassion, and then to having generated those 2 to the extent where we see it as our own individual responsibility to ensure that all beings achieve a state freed from pain and suffering, we generate the altruistic attitude of universal responsibility. And those are the 6 causes that will lead to the effect of bodhicitta, the mind that is determined to achieve Buddhahood for the sake of others. But for that training to go well, we first need to generate impartiality. And impartiality, that starts with the recognition that right now we feel closeness towards some and distance towards the vast majority. And that is a mind that is contrary to bodhicitta. We need to recognize, as was presented last week, just how pervasive this bias is within us, or our attitude of bias. And having recognized this, then we can start to transform the way we relate to beings, coming to the point where we feel equally close to all of them. And last week then we concluded with looking at how to meditate on the group of beings that we have a neutral relationship with, those that we don't feel that particularly close or averse towards. And I used the illustration of a mob of kangaroos, because these would certainly be beings that we are quite indifferent about. And so that was an illustration, and then we spoke about how then one expands that meditation to include more beings, include all those within the category of neutral. Now tonight we'll start to look at how to cultivate impartiality further by moving to the next group, and that is the group that we feel an affinity with, that we feel close to.
아니 바르메 심젤레 미 심젠 바르메기 심젠다 Mancedia, more Shingia, Mashingba, the Nick Susule, Penda Gaya, Media, Simjan, Jela, Jingering Beba, some Tanjo Comiodu, Dine, de Zulia, and some of the Chasan, nearing Meba Jibaru, Chile, Leondu, then the Rangi Yin Chola Miche, some Daje, and then nearing Bombaina, nearing Meba Tanyo Gombaina, then I just send the Tanyo Gomiadi, the Lela, you to go to Casino, because the Jumzen, the Jiba Charwanium, by me Simjala, some Dane, Tanyo Mimbi, Tanyo. Quebec, Jumsen, some down Hadi, Jumsen to Jibacha, just at the name of Yin Chola mean some Dajin, Tanyum some Dayudu, Tanyum the Yedi, Lela Chakorwa.
The meditation started with first recognizing the pervasiveness of our bias within us. Then we moved on to overcoming it by looking first at the beings that we are neutral with, those who are to us in this life strangers, those who in this life we haven't renewed our acquaintance with. And we started with them because we don't have an emotional relationship with them, one where attachment readily arises or aversion readily arises. And having trained well here, then one is ready to move to the next group, those that we do feel closest with. And if we have created this basis well in the previous steps of the meditation, we'll be able to proceed much more quickly now with the second group, because the reasonings that we used previously with beings with whom we have a neutral relationship with, we use here now those same reasons with those with whom we are close to.
Adene Siti, Dene, Seti, Nyawa, Namdang, Sidur, Chesan Setigi, Nyawa, the Miche, Delia, Tanyo, Gomkore, Seshigurwa.
So now let's turn to the text, page 33 in the middle. Once you have meditated like this upon neutral people, then consider those who have helped you in this life and whom you hold as dear.
Then Seti is Seti, Nyawa, Namla, Miche, Tanyo, Gomkore, Sita, Nardo, Seti, Sosuke, Pama, Punya, Pamiki Punja said, Ni, Susuga, go when you mean Yawa to kill some dache. Then the Mungazolia, that Susuga, Yawa, Ninja do to kill Susuga, some of the dust nearing Roger or Kashela Kache, that dust Kashel Deskawa, the Nua Rochetine, Kashin, Shishung Yevanza, nearing Yediro, the names that are to Yin Yawa to get Chasan some dache. Chasada nearing Yabachiba sometime or Eje. That didn't. Niring Meba Chiba some dango de Carre Lamna, the Jumzero Chiba, Siama Shavan, Jumzen Chibare, Chesa Coronzuki, Rangi, Ningi Chone, Coronzunga, some taban, Ningi, Chasa, Deva Deba, the Dumamitoba Chibare, Chesa, Chasana, Deva Kukure, Chesa Dunga Kukuomar, Mugova, and Chesangi, Kashelia, Yaga Deva, Yaga Chevaina, Kashela, Chicken Magawa Chevaina, Cousin Chasana, Deva Deba Chibare, Chasana, Digi Yagi, Yaga Chekure, Chasana, Digi Mogo, Dunga Mugova Chibanza, Kashelia, Chik Dunga Yagi, Chiki Dong, Numjuta, Kisheta, just Magawa Chinchevaina, and Dunga Kior, Chisa Dunga Mituba Chibara was. Chisan Corazon when the Dunga Mituba Chibare in them, Chile Dunga, Yagi, Jeda, Chile Deva, Digi Yagi, and Dinchena, and the Chin Eliagachena. Meet when some dinner and Jimmy Duas and Picasso. Carson Cross Chasan Digito, but do me to the Chipares. The nigger some dana. Dirwa did it, near Baram Jen, the Gene, and your mind, but Tanyam Kishera, that Nyawa mean some dancing or the Nyawa de Kashela, Gawa, Kashela Dus, God Chichum Yorwa down there.
Now we're moving into looking at the second grouping of beings, those to whom in this life, at this present moment in this life, that we feel close to. So this may include your parents, your spouse, whomever your close circle of loved ones is at this time. So we look here we look at this small group, but bearing in mind what you've been meditating on and what we looked at then last week, which was that even when you take a small group of the people that matter most to us at this moment in our life, even amongst them, we can differentiate, we can have bias. For example, feeling closer to one of your parents than the other. So here in this section, one would be close to both of one's parents, but still between the two one would feel a bit closer towards the one. So here, now we're looking at this group that we're closest to, and we're recognizing that even within this there's a sense of partiality still. And now we start with the meditation. And we're using the same reasons as we used with the group of neutral beings. Firstly, that everyone within my close circle, the small group that I feel a strong bond with, they are all the same in the terms of yearning for happiness, wishing to be freed from all pain and misery, no matter how slight. There's no way to differentiate between them in this regard. We are all the same. And therefore, seeing that they are the same in this way, it's inappropriate for me to take more joy in the successes of one than the other, or to strive more to help one than the other, or to long for one more than the other to overcome difficulties. Because the yearning for freedom from pain, for lasting stable happiness, is the same between them. There is actually no valid basis to differentiate here.
Dene ni desu samdang du dene sosugi ni dike de ane chik Gabrielia ane sosolia ane chik ben susuyin yungwe na Gabriel sosola Gabriela an sosola ga che je da sosola ma ga che je yunguru wa de ben ni ne sosola Gabriel robo je ri robo ya ga je Gabrielia ga she ge ne robo ya bu ma je ba de ni gi ne sosugi samda ni yungwe ne su an zo la ta sa la ni yungwe ga she ge sosola semda nye je da ga she semda ma nye je de yunguru wa da ji sa yungu ri yi ne 다들 semdañe 지겐디기 야 제마디와 또 sem다ring와 제요래 다들 sem다ring와 지겐디기 냐마디와 sem다ñe와 제요래 진짜 디니 자 코니기 가브리엘 sem다ñe와 제다 가브리엘 sem다ring와 제바 소소를 지바이네 레 아니 디자 디니게 캬바카미도아스 공가치마도 아니 데니게 삼다지 코니기다 지바르마다 디야가레샤 띵알레 sem다ñe와 디sem다ring와레샤스네 캬바카체미도스 데니게 지바레샤 삼다 두스친데 삼다 해레시오로.
Secondly, one can include here that in our intimate circle of friends, our family that we are closest with, and our friends, this group that we are closest with, we know that relationships are not fixed, they're not static. Even with someone for whom many years you count as the closest person to you in the world, there is flux. Sometimes there's some disagreement, sometimes there's some annoyance, sometimes there's disappointment. Sometimes we want to be separated and have a bit of space. So here in the second part of the meditation, we reflect on the change, on the flux, on the impermanence of our relationships. So that when we are experiencing some change, we recognize this is normal. This is nothing to be surprised about. This is something to ignore and disregard because impermanence is in the nature of relationships. They sometimes move in one direction, but we know even moving in a particular direction, that movement into that direction is not permanent. It will change at one point. We have plenty of experience of this. So here, the second part, we see that even those that we are closest to now, that will change. And those that we are a little distant from, that we were closer to before, that will change.
다 소소년자나네 니니도나네 아니 가시게 소소량 소소랑 충충인베가블에 배 전부시 제와슈제 안치기 야고슈제제 제되연제 안다 야 첨부차제로 베니 십중업주 차서에 제려야 아니 분야되게 되sem다는 뭐 차다 되 마가와 제다 연구로 분야 나로데 연구로와 아니 디체 나 분야 지디기 아니 소소 충두가블에 시라직 전부제 제와다디네 가야 매바체 아니 제 아니 되서 제 직년보로나 지게 사야지 되서 투제다딩아 연구로 분야 나로 되는 다체 안데 소소래 되네 제마로 첨부차제 달로 십중업주 제려야 다 첨부슈 차제 연구로 되네 제사디 분야 소소래 분야 니디기 직디기 소소 충주인디 갑래 소소래 야고체 거우슈제다 셈다니고슈제 다 첨부차야도 다 지게 셈다는 무체 소소 되스 마가가서 제 연구로와 부직디기 소소 충주인디 갑래 셈다니보라 마제 되스 톱제라 따야다데 강아데야다 디네기 지게 레가이나 망아구야 아니 지게 되네체네 되 강아데 되가서 한 제마 첨부차야도 배 셈다니보 첨부슈차 중구로와 지나디 분야니 되네 소소량 수야가래 랍나 다당알 디자가래 춘준갑로 고두아래 스로와다 직디 춘준갑로 나데 야가지 다데 날야 두아래스 지분야니디 아니 디야가래 디두아래스 셰야준에 메팅에 직바로 차들어와 그래서 디네자 니가게 가라서네 다디디 날야 지 야고치겐디 춘준갑로 야가 강아 먹을 야가 먹고 강아 먹을 때 손사야데 다데 직날이야 강아 지마간 chen 춘춘 갈nga 전부지 제와 슈체서서 디네자 디닐이야 디야가다 디두아스 카이 케와 민도 제자 디네자 두 년이 직바레샤 선비게 삼다나디 디네게 삼다베나 고 도스체네 삼다베나 김제 삼다베나 디네게 고 셈디 뇽부로 찬용으로 지 요야게 디네 삼당고르서 그러다.
So we're staying with the second part of the meditation, the impermanence of relationships. Use the illustrations from your own life. Think of when you were young, who your best friend in the whole world was. Now, you probably don't see them anymore. Here, and then throughout the expanse of this life, there are other people that you are particularly close to, who you relied on in your life, who were there for you when you needed them. And now perhaps you've also lost contact with them. So over the expanse of our life, we have seen such variety in terms of the relationships we've had with a single person, such change and transformation. And this kind of come about for a variety of reasons, especially when one's younger and one's still growing as a person and coming to know oneself, and one's interests can change. Or one moves apart and you lose contact with someone. So many things can happen. So perhaps we can take an illustration, but you utilize your own experience, that when you're young, you had two siblings and you were close with them. So the three of you had a wonderful relationship when you were young. Then as you grow up, and you find your own ways in life and your own individual interests and personalities, and perhaps scatter in different directions, when you get together after some years, you may well find that with one, it was as if you're never apart. You reunite, and immediately it was like when you're children again. The same warmth and trust is there. But with the other, the distance is too great. The difference between one's interests now is so great that you're with them and it's almost like you're with someone you don't recognize anymore, and they look at you in a similar way. So this illustrates the impermanent nature of our relationships. And then so in the second point of the meditation, we recognize the impermanence of our relationships, and then we utilize this knowledge in this way by saying, so of these two siblings of mine, the one with whom I've reunited as if we've never been apart, and the other It's like a stranger has walked into my home. Both of them were equally kind to me when I was young. Both of them I was equally close to when I was young. Now we have very different relationships. But how can I point to the one and say, you matter more because you're nice to me right now, and I get on with you right now. But the other, well, thanks for all that we did for each other back in the day, but I don't feel the same anymore. How can that be appropriate? So here we come to see that the fickleness of our relationships, impermanence of our relationships, this too is no basis for bias.
Bendigo samdanje nga juge da dus komyo de so nyen dike nyen gan de shue na chasa da di de ngal nyen de nye wa re sa de di nyen de ngal de taring wa re sa kan mi de chasa jikba de sha chasa nyen se de Gabrielia de niki koron zu ngone sambina dewa de ba da dunga mi de ba jikba re sha so ngone samda na so ya anji yakbo che ba da yakbo ma che ba de ne jikba re sha di ya ga che sha di du ga che sha sna she ya ga mi du de ne za nyen chasa da jikba yin sambe samda de 소술야 아니 소술야 야고 제바데 직바레 선배 삼다데 아니 두스체네 곰제데 녀바데 곰야데 곰나데 디셰르와 데네 곰체베젤라 데네 아니 소술야 체델야 소술 녀베기겐미 셈제나 미나다다 데네기 녀베기겐 데솔레 미젠데 당용 곰고레세 데스서 녀레 미제 당보 아니 Barme Simchen Mina Tanyo Kumne Sodi Lodi Ginja Kora Jansar, Watanyum Lodi Jansar. Dene, and it Sosuinian Mi Samda, Dene Tanyo Kumyo, Gumzen Jiba, Samdana, Gumzen Jiba Char, Dene Zada, Sosugi, Magas, Sedila, Nova Chicken, Tesola Mise, and then Tanyo Kumainda, that Tanyum Kia de Lela Yeturis.
Yeah, two steps in the meditation that we can use for those that we feel close towards. Firstly, recognizing that amongst the people that we are closest to, we cannot differentiate between them at all in terms of their desire for happiness and peace. There's no way we can discriminate between their worthiness of achieving achieving happiness and be freed of pain and misery. And secondly, we reflect on the permanent nature of our relationships with people in this life, and that the current state of our relationship with someone is no basis for us to value them, is no basis for us to feel that the fulfillment of their hopes and dreams, or our helping them to fulfill their hopes and dreams, is any more worthy than anyone else. Because just in this lifetime, relationships change continuously. This meditation on those that we feel closest towards has been come about after reflecting on those that we have a neutral relationship with. And if done in this order, it will the feelings of impartiality will come about much more readily. Starting first coming to recognize the pervasiveness of bias within us, then developing a sense of partiality towards those that we are neutral towards, and then bringing that to those that we feel closest to. Starting now to see all beings within this group in a similar way, having a similar sense of closeness towards them. Then we are ready to move to the third group. That is the group of those that we feel averse towards, or we dislike.
Dusine sosogi neba chicken ya some daja tanyum kumyodu, Tajibarwa, soso neba chicken simjen gandichi near, and the coronzung and some dana corons of Dewa Deba the Dungami de Chibare, Chesa, Dewa Duetan Dungami de Chiba Inza, and then Delia Chilikawache or the Chili Mikawache or Kimsaka Mido Simpe, some dia. That dinner, then I never came Simjen Dige, and doesn't want Chesana, I never chebare, Chesan Koloya, and Chike, Semakawa Kawachiko, I mean, Susun never chico lavana, Chesada, that then I also never chebare, and then Anzu Dinigi, some down Dini, Yamadiwa, Malia, Yawachi Pay, or Toyores, sometime, bending around to Sedina la Samdavine and Yatseng long Nielia and the Kawushu, Robache, been around the Ingura, Buddha Boma Samdana, Buddhist Narsoslebe, Shukache, and Sosolia Robache, Pandagang, Mangu, Seche, and the Kawushu, Lomang Virilia. And Digelia Sosara, Yamdo, Chance Yaptin, Tumburje, Kawuche, Lokashe. That Digelia, then a Trubujap, Sasan Kate to do, and then Nazukascorna, Dingalia, Bene. Nyedung Tasong Alia to the Yabuchema, so said me Jawas called Magawachi. That's sometimes, and that to get sometimes Magawachi, the Karisam Tangerson, Sosulia Gangante, the Guindi, Pajuga Gangante, Guindi sometimes, tell us sometimes Magawachi. She said, the Choniga some Dangoma. Then there's Yapo some time, that in the Kablangalia Gangati, Guin Cheva, Japan to Jashavari. In a Lokashi ring, Yelia. Alia Kawushu, Rocha Kanga Mambo Saison, some Davena, Cesar Dimidida, Midian, Gareda, Yagare, Alia Yagare, Dua, Yaga, some town, Dua, some Tangorelana, then Nanyum some time at the Mero, Tana Charu, Cousin. That then I'll do a cheap, Kimsenji, the Dua, some Davana, Yama, Lomongbiring, Alia, Washu, Pando Kanga, the Pando Yawacheson, Cesar. Pando Yabacha call Yaga some dogs. Yaga the Duaniga some tango do it. She said Yaga Jeba and the Yaga some down, do some town. Then Yahadu Kebakam, Dini some town, call it touchy to call it Dujares and sometime induce. That touchy to Yapore some time. She's on what Tanium race or Tanium sometime, although she's on do a race and some time. I mean, she said that it do in the long amazing Yamaring, Yabush, some time. Then they call Tanyum Chile to a Chagua, and Dinashi, the same gendige, Sosamaga Cedelia, Sosuneva Jakangashu, dating a Jimene. Dadan Alganga, Jawangamatua, Nalia Penya Otoy, the teaching Jawangamakongi Pamada, Denichi Punja Junior, Nalia Penya Otoyores. Cisa Cedela Ganga Jebena, Sengamala Pandochi Yores. Cisa Dinza, and then Tachi to call ya Duare some diagram in the Cisa, the Duchin some Davena, Tanyum some Dana, the Dinichagorva.
With experience in these meditations, then one is ready to move on to the most challenging group that has been left to last. And the reason for leaving the group that beings that we currently dislike, the reason for leaving them to last is so that we have a lot of skill in this meditation and that we can then engage with this last group in a skillful way and readily transform the way we currently feel about them. So the group of beings that we feel averse towards is because we consider that they have harmed us or our loved ones in this life, that they've acted in a way contrary to our wishes, or they've done something or said something that we found unpleasant. Often, it's nothing much more than that. So this is the group now that we turn towards. We use the first step of the meditation is the same as elsewhere, reminding ourselves that each of these beings that we currently feel averse towards, they all want happiness. They all want to be freed from pain and sorrow and misery and abide in peace. We can't differentiate between them or any being in this way at all. All beings are exactly the same. And we cannot point to a single being and say their need for happiness is more worthy, their desire for happiness is more worthy, their wish to be freed of pain is more worthy or less. So that's the first point of the meditation. The second is to use impermanence again. So here, you'll have experience of this too in your life, of someone whom now you deeply dislike, maybe even you feel hatred for them, or if that's eased, still carry resentment for them. But that person and you haven't had a relationship like this throughout your life. Often, when relationships go sour, this is how they end up. And whenever this person is called to mind, if we see them or we hear their name, or our mind turns towards them, our mind is full of hatred or resentment. But some years before, when we met and fell in love, then all that they did for you, all the care and the tenderness and the gentleness and the help that they showed you, this was who they are. That was a reflection of the qualities that they have. And those qualities they still have. So our way of thinking about them now is out of balance. So here, in reflecting on the impermanent nature of relationships, one isn't trying to ignore the harm that has been done and the pain that one feels, but to rather see them in a more balanced way, in a more realistic way. They are not pervaded by faults. They have the capacity, and they've shown it so many times, for kindness and gentleness. So here, you remind yourselves of the impermanent nature of relationships, and that these people that we feel averse towards, this is not how the relationship we've had with them throughout this life. And then we can take this back further to past lives, and for sure, even with people that we've only had bad relationships with in this life, from the very first moment of meeting them, since beginningless time, this is not how it's been. So with those with whom the relationship has changed in this life, and with those with whom the relationship in this life has not changed, with both groups, due to impermanence in our past lives, we would have had very different relationships, and those would have included relationships of kindness and care.
Andine sikjedwa dene sedire nyoba chebike semjen namla nyambarcha sediti sigurwa chisan sedile nyoba cheke semjen le miche ndele sem nyambo kom kores tanga zuge karyo sen donda karanga zu karyo sen sedile nyoba cheke dele nga zu nyoba cheke dele semjen dele nga zu tajidu be dujar sedile magawa nya da she gorwa chisan de magawa sha da she de ani ndele denige samnodi gedi na denichi gedi samnodi ta dobena ani dele jambadan 제와 기도 말와 걸 막아잖냐 아sam다 되베나 지산다 당원도 jambadan 제와 기어자 기어원자 마도 삼나 타지도 걸 막아와지 삼노디 매바 쇠고 거다로와 매바 쇠고 다 타지도 걸 막아와지 삼노디 매바 쇠야라 간에 쇠고래랍나 지산 셈데 땅님 쇠야 땅님 쇠 지바로 쇠고라다 안 간에 쇠고래랍나 지산 세델 양아 녀버치엔디게 삼다베나 아주게 세델이야 아나 판바티고 주요래서다 강아지 강아지야다 데니게 로바치에데 강아세야다 로바치 세델 양아 로바치 다댕알리야 녀버지버레데 이네 세델 로바치 디니 인자 코 타지도 막아와 제거야 레민도 다댕알레 다디갑리야 알리야 녀버 강아제베 있나야 니엘리야 로바 망보 제도와 디니 인자 코 타지도 두자레라 민도 니마 야보라 제도와 선배섬데 제사 타지도 코 두자레 선배 삼로데 바시용도 니마 로바 제바다 펜바투바 제 삼다요데 데네코 아다 타지도 안도 야고 말해 선배게 삼다데 가제 지바로 레용으로 봐 안디나시 내가 세델이야 녀버치 삼데 세델이야 녀버치야데 데 개왕아마라 토마요마 제가 개왕아마라 니 파마 먹고 제유래 제가 니 거의 부 먹고 제녀베 나 거의 알아야 제와 먹고 제 로버치 판도 슈주요데 데자 세델이야 강아다 녀버제베네 개왕아마다 디술이야 수수 파마치 수술 제와치네 펜바야고 주요데 데네 삼단 코 타지도 두자레라 메누아 다데네가 두자레데 니메갑을 양아 야고치야려 다 콜라 타지도 야고레라면 니메갑을 야고치바르데 다데갑을 양아 두자시고 제데딘자 콜라 타지도 야고레서 타지도 두자레선 데네 따야면 누 세상 직바로 제샤고 가브리레 야고치도 가브리레 두보치도 코 데네 차그마도 타지도 야고 코 두자레 삼다데 지금 누어선 베게다 삼노디 리기로 하치자 땅님 삼들리 두고래
We return to the text in the middle, page 33. And those who have harmed you in this life and whom you consequently hold as adversaries. So this is where we are in our meditation, looking at the group that we feel dislike towards, averse towards, those whom we consider have harmed us in this life, whom we consider have acted against our best interests, or those of our group, those who we consider have spoken to us in an inappropriate manner or acted towards us in an unwanted way. So here, in the reflections that we've mentioned before, the first was on seeing how all beings only want happiness, and secondly, the impermanence of our relationships, especially where relationships have turned sour in this life. We need to reflect well here, because again, what we are trying to do is overcome the wrong way of seeing someone and develop impartiality. And we do this not through denying or trying to forget the harm that has happened in the relationship, but rather to restore balance by reminding ourselves of what they have done for us in this life, the kindness they have shown towards us, how they have gone out of their way directly to help us, how indirectly things they have done have benefited us. So we're trying here to bring about balance with regard to how we relate to them. Bring ourselves back from this extreme of seeing them as pervaded by faults and negativity, and rather to have an impartial way of relating to them, not seeing them in a distorted manner. So that's the first part of how we utilize impermanence, looking at this life. Second part then is to tie back to our previous lives, and this we can utilize also with all beings we don't have a good relationship with, because every being we have a relationship in past lives, and those would have included relationships of where they have been our parent who cared for us as their child. And this is the same with everyone who harms us in this life. Even if it's someone that we only, in the time we've known them, the relationships have only been harmful. Always, we've had close and intimate connections with them in the past, when they've helped us in ways that were quite extraordinary, and we relied on wholeheartedly on these people. So therefore, we need to remind ourselves that if we see someone through only one lens as being pervaded by negativity, this is completely wrong and unbalanced. Meditating in this way, an impartial attitude will arise, an unbiased attitude, where we don't see someone as pervaded by faults, but come to understand that they have an abundance of good qualities too.
ane chik tanyum samda, dine samlodi da jikbaaru tanyum ra chik le yondu, dine semjaya thamjaya samda wara chisa da rangla ya jawa metinga tsetile jawa metinga semjaya na da susuki nye na da susuki susu nebe kiyandi da semjaya ganda chiki ne da chasan jikba reshas da chisan gabriele panto chimburu gabriele neba yungora gabriele panne gaya meba ngoma shingwa chan ligora dine insa that jasan di semjen di ngala yagare se di nyenje se yaga tsiwa bune jisan da di ngala semjen di chule nyenje se ba yago shu go je di jewa ngama diwa ji gabriele nyama diwa sosugi jawa da sosule neba ki ma ngo chung yore de dadelya neba ki jikanga tinga di pe ngi jawo de pe shu dujara samnak ta ga im no garsan jewa ngama di no khoya ji sosulya nyen cha ji sosulya jewa ji jamba ji dine che gabriele 가야 제와미데 ngoma 차대 최고 진짜 디니자 디 타지도 디 야가레 디 두가레 선심제 디 개발체와 균이게 민도 제가 세상 직바로 레샤 아সম다다 됐음전 타자 심전 간지네 대화되어바다 동안 메드바 직바레 제가 디니자 코로나종원이 섬단에 대화되어바데 동안 직바인자 말 콘졸야 di kebar chegoya di yagare dudugare se kai kebar kai minduas chegoya kai min dine za samdana chebena semjan cha za gane shineda 당념 라레샤 스당알이야 디 야가레 디 두아레 선 캬바체 민두 차산 찍바레샤 선삼다이들 자고로만
When you've become proficient in meditating like this, then one can take the outcomes of all three parts of this meditation, of all three classes of beings, take those outcomes, bringing them together, and seeing that those who are currently strangers to us in this life, as well as those whom currently we have a great sense of affinity towards, as well as those that we have an aversion towards, there is no valid basis to discriminate between them at all. One cannot find a single being who is any different in terms of longing for happiness and to be freed of suffering. And there's no basis to say that one is more worthy of the fulfillment of the achievement of happiness and overcoming of suffering than another. Secondly, when we look at the impermanence of relationships just in this life, we see how strangers become friends, friends become enemies, enemies become strangers, and all wide variety of permutations in between. Relationships are impermanent in this life, and therefore there's no basis to say, this is the being I will help more, this being I value more than that. And that same thinking applies then thirdly to relationships that have spanned lifetimes. No matter what relationship we have with someone right now, whether they are a stranger to us, they're someone in our close orbit, or someone that we generally keep a distance from, we've had the widest variety of relationships with them across lifespans. So therefore, there is also no basis here, thirdly, to discriminate between one over another.
dene semjen tamje la sem nyombe tangyom gebar jawo sro de jisan semjen tamje la mi che tangyom gom go re che ondus chong gom go re che dan nga zu ji la gar yo re sene dan nga zu yin yi cho sosul ya robo che de sosul ge gao ge yin yi cho de le be nga be ga shin ga wa ro chi ga shin ji yo ba che sosul ne be jin de le be chi ma ga wa re che ma ga wa che da sosul che de la penye ga ya men de yo yune meeting semjen la ya 아니 강아 가르예베네 삼루균에마다 낭매샤 조로와다 아니 가서 삼루 나래 망치 디요로와다 디네 인자다 디네 메바제 땅념 고묘도 두셰 땅념 고묘도 디네 semjen 년지 스스 년지다 통베네 디안 직바레사다 소소로 네베지겐다 소소게 아니 저와 유네메 semjen 가네 통베네 소소의 년지다 소소로 네베지엔제 세대라 소설의 판례가 아니면 심지 되는 숨디 숨가 다 통통어도 숨가 지발에서 비게 삼로식 레고고 당하줄이야 딜레 야래 디 두가래 디 이게 낭매디 삼당고 말해서 매매제 지사 베니 소수기 인다 자오다 뇌베기에다 뇌 판례가 아니면 땅님기 발미게 심지 숨갈 미 통여도 숨갈 따지도 어디 차산 지바레스 지사 가브리엘 양아 판도야 가브리엘 네베기요레 지사 디 야가레 디 두가레선 샤게 민데 차산 지바지야인스 지바도 레샤스 그래서 김전 삼당에도 가서는 체델야 네베기엔디게 개왕아마디왕아들 강아 가서 판도야 고두요레 체델야 안 판도 두겐디 개왕아마디야 네베기요레 체델은 다데 가브리엘 가야 저메도 고마싱엔디기 개왕아마데 배 소수게 가고 니시 우중요 제요레스 진짜 디네 인자 차산 디 야가레 디 두가레 고마싱고레 셰버레스 민두 차산 직바레샤 선베 다산 두스체네 삼당고레 셰르와다.
And the paragraph concludes with finally generating partiality towards all sentient beings of all 6 realms. The situation we find ourselves in now, as practitioners who are yet to achieve transformation through this meditation, is that we have a sense of closeness to some, and they tend to be those who are helping us, who act in accordance with our wishes. We have a sense of dislike towards those whom we consider are harming us or have harmed us, or those that we care for. And thirdly, the rest, we just ignore, we pay no attention to them. But through meditating on impartiality repeatedly over a sustained period, then whomever we physically encounter, whomever we perceive from a distance, or whomever we call to mind, we'll have an equal sense of closeness towards them. Where we will experience this most is that in whomever we are interacting with, how they are currently relating to us, we will give rise to the same sense of closeness. No matter whether they're acting in a way that's in accordance with our wishes, or they're acting in a way that's contrary to our wishes, or they're walking past us, ignoring us. The same sense of closeness towards them will arise within us. Because we will have come to understand impermanence well, in the sense of knowing that however the relationship is in this present moment, has not always been like this, not in this or past lives, and soon it will change, and it will not always be like this either. Therefore, there's nothing permanent here to grasp at. It's ever changing. In this way, we come to feel an affinity and a tenderness with all.
gawo chige ane chige yabu pando chige dige ati yabu cheson sebe yabu re sebe samta je ande le ane jinga zugi gawo chige samde le tu gorwa na ane dade sosulya chige chedele nebi jigen da chedele ane nga zugi pande kaya jo me digen digelya nga zu sim gawa de le tu go maroda di 가르치는 le tu go marlamna ane kon주기 nga zu le jebanga ma diwa nga zu le pande yabu do yorde ine 디 판도 바딩아서 하고 뭐 쟁교 셈래 전투고 말에 제마투 바인자 아니 거기 마젠 바자 델리아 안에 가고디 투고 말봐 안에 디나심 디르다 가서 디르바데 요 김센디 디르바데 내게 삼다마투비 끼엔제네 베네 체델레 이네 제왕 가소레 체del이야 소설야 가고샤 고슈 제제 안 체슈리아 소설라 마가와라 지가소레 마가와 차송바 있나 당아저 삼단 마가와디 코가라 마가와지 송삼제 델야 안 지디 삼다제 코 마가와디 나즈 네베기에데 삼다제 소소라랑 디삼네 야네 야도 다제 콜리아 안 나서 마가와기 거봐 안 델야 롱 녀마 로망비녜려 소소려 로버 제와디 댕교 말아 제사로 봐자 디삼단고 말아 데니 인자 땅님리 두고 말아 데니 인자 땅 빼는 세딜 삼다메라 세딘 개왕암 롱암인 로카시녜려 소술베 야고제 다디 내가블 소설 약간한테 두고 싶다는 거 지금 당하서 삼단 콜레 다디 가서 가 삼단 다디 알까한테도 디 김선 기냥야 삼단에 그디나 콜 코르게 마도 콜레 야고 삼단 균리 말해 제 말에 완전 다니 롱아마디와 중앙을 강한 코롱이 판도바디 삼다베네 판도바디 배가 소설 강아지도 강아 유디컬 판도 야고 제바디 그래서 디니게 삼다바 있나 오 다딩알이야 곧 배두자생기 롱아메 녀말링알 판도야 오시 제스다오네 그 타주도 야고람 누가 말했으면 비게 데니게 삼로 콜 누가 삼다야디 슈충 주고래 거가서 녀마디와 지 소수게 판도다 소소 강아세 로버 제스다오네 강아 판도 야고 세송 거 데니 제송 삼비 삼다야디 그 게딘디 녀마알 제제 게딘데 제요도 다데 콜이야 배 마가와지 삼로도 슈충 주고로 받아 슈충 따두고래 지상 디니 인장 저기 두스 삼다도 샘전 탐제래 니링 메바 땅님 레투야데 디네 용고로 와 내가 저기 디지부자 괜찮야디 강아제교 괜찮냐 삼다도 바이네 거기 판도 제바데 삼마다 바이네 콜이야 아니 가서래 잠바치야다 딜레투 말이야. 그디나 소설야 코르기야다. 콜리아 네베기에 삼도 코르기에데 그디나 삼도 레디고로 와. 지난 딜레데 바이나 잠제세데 기투야에 깔래 하고 차고로 와.
right at the beginning of the reflection on impartiality, we looked at the starting step of seeing how pervasive bias is within us. This, by now, through your meditations, you would have come to see. So let's talk a little bit then about why we have this bias, why we have such a partial attitude, that we do have a very real sense of closeness towards some, but also a dislike for others, and then see so many more as being strangers. So these three current states, that through this meditation we will eventually abandon completely. So this, if we take then as an illustration of someone that we have a great sense of closeness towards, perhaps a child, perhaps a partner, or a dear friend. And we think of, so why do I have this sense of closeness towards them? And we'll see that with this person, we tend to perhaps share worldview, share interests. There's a lot in common. And moreover, they help us a lot. They show us tenderness, affection, they have interest in us. And they have regularly and readily been there for us. Whether our needs were trivial, they showed interest. Whether our needs were great, they showed us their attention and gave us the time that we needed. And a bond has been built, and they matter to us. But this person too is an ordinary person like ourselves, and they also have bad days. And there are times when they've been a bit short with us, they've been a bit distracted with us, or maybe they've even been upset with us. Nevertheless, when we call them to mind now, while you're listening to this talk, and you call them to mind, such situations that will have happened don't readily spring to mind because of all the kindness and care and gentleness they have shown us. So we see here that we tend to see this person right now in a particular way. It's not the whole story, but we take a particular part of the aspect, a particular aspect of their personality, and we allow that to dominate them, and we see them just through that one lens. Hence, we feel a closeness towards them. And also, because of this, when they are having a bad day, we can easily deal with this. We trust that this is only temporary, it will pass, this is not who they are. They will soon be back to how they usually are, holding us close, being tender and gentle towards us. So here, we need to see how this is how we relate to those that we are close to. See what's accurate in this and what's mistaken, and then use this to relate to others. Because what we are doing here is we're taking a current dominant personality trait and painting that person as being that one personality trait. And therefore, when we call them to mind, we don't see them in their whole expanse of who they are currently as a person, but we color it in this one way. And this is how we are with those that we are closest to. And it's also the same with those that we are averse. Moreover, with this person that we're closest to, we readily overcome their negative traits because we recall all their positive traits and all their helpful and kind interactions that we've had in this life. With others, whether we are moderately close to them, or we dislike them, or we're indifferent towards them, we have forgotten the tremendous kindness they have shown us. And we've forgotten because it may have been some time ago in this life, it may have been because we didn't really value it so much, or because The passage of time has crossed lifetimes, and we cannot recall it. But nevertheless, each and every being around us, each and every being we've interacted with in this life, and each and every being we haven't interacted with in this life, over the expanse of times, over the expanse of lifetimes, life forms, they have shown us the same care and tenderness that the persons that we are currently closest with are showing us. The only difference is we're recalling readily with this one small group, and with the other, we have long forgotten. The only difference is our memory of the events. That's all. There is no difference between beings in terms of whether they have shown us kindness or not, or how much kindness they've shown us or not. We can point and say, right now, or in this lifetime, there we can say. But over the expanse of lifetimes, we can't point to a difference between beings. All we can say is that we have forgotten. And merely forgetting is hardly a basis for discrimination. But by allowing ourselves to continue to be deceived by painting someone through a very narrow lens and saying, this person this particular trait, personality trait, is who this person is, kind or awful. And forgetting about all the interactions we've had over lifetimes, this makes it impossible for us to generate genuine love and care for others because of these wrong consciousnesses, because of perceiving beings in a way that is not in accordance with reality.
Niki nga 저기 최 냠린 거선 마당 외에 최 냠린 마제베치 최 거선 마당 외에 당 저기 되니게 땅님 삼다디 지게 소설이야 야고르와 베네 강제레 저기 최 케멜렌바이나라 최 마제베 최 냠린 마제베네 당 아줄이야 수인의 셈 흘려지다 셈레 시디고거를 시디고거다지 시디고야디 대와고야바디 아니 아주 최 켈레나말레 최제다 마키시오마 술리나디 고고레 지상 강아디 셈마기바다 강아디 고고마 술리나 고고마 최 마제간레 고고마와 지바르와 근데 인상 아주 최고 기시마셰바지 최 켈멜렘바 최 냠는 마제베이네야 안지게 두스제나 삼다나 판도여되게 최고거레 베네 로 베니야미링라 로주랑 예래야 안 소설이야 제가 보시오 제 전부시오 저 소설이야 판야 뭐또 되게지 다데 내가블이야 소설이야 강아데 소설당 미팅바지 차대베나 땅아 저게 코요콜레 미팅바다 다데가라 강아데바 디장냥 삼다되베나 게디네 셈리야 셈마기바차 소설 셈마기바차 게디네 디레 셈마기바차 부수도바차야다 아니 콜리야 안 셈 네베 삼보디 안에 양도 코르디네 아니 디마제 미디기 계시 암조 고용되네 미디기 미션다기 때문에 디기 고 계시 람상 셈야 강아 미디기 강아 미디를 두자라 삼데 셈 콘스야다 디지도 소설 셈 마기바 안 데네 시에도 안 미디 페니소 직람가디와 파수도 직 통용되네 람상 셈 마기바 차야다 마기바 차 안데 직토 동이나 주보 넘줄 냠바돼야다 안 데네기 용에도 지선 셈리아 소설이야 마기바도 진리고서 마기바자 강아지 지선 디네자 디네기 안에 야도 야네 삼단도 땅되변에 셈데 강아 슈처처처도야마도 판도야 말아 지선 다 디네기도 지는 강아 디네기 마찬버리나 다등 알다 강아도 제손 배둑제 제손 선배 삼단제 개왕 냠마 롱아마 가신예말이야 소소 판도 약고 제바 삼단 냠마 알야 코디니 판도 제소디 약고 제소 삼다도 데니게 냠마게 판도 약보체 미디 약보체서 셈비게 삼노 슈치 땅요도 다델야 콜 마게 삼노도 슈총 주고래 지사 삼노 슈총 주도 소설리아 셈리아 콘로다 안지게 콜 마게 삼노 콘르게데 삼노 슈총 주고래 지사 데니자 소설 콘로 마게와 셈 슈총 반 소설리아 디기 야리 고라 지사 셈리아 흘레 체용고래 지사 데니 삼다베나 지사 데니 삼다베나 마줄리아 and simlia lule chaya dan konomakia dan and dinigi kabar chui or some madabine simile chaya and yagayungore and dine some davene and gidini sort of mirror kishi amjokoena lamsambe dukjare sabe samla du litu marwa chesa dadi kisnima duje nyama de wangale yakoche dadi ne kablo konga macha jangal duje chigor some macha mare dine ngama diwa dine gauchi pe yakoche or da sambe samde kolyan 디지기 배 마가외 당섬 축첨부들 얘기 말해 말해봐는 소리자 셈 흘려 채용으로 와 sometimes 셈내 강아 중앙 그래서 개왕아마 기시메다 등에 데디 롱아마쇼 롱아마시 롱 가시니에 지냐마 지냐 용구로 적버제 첨부제 로버제 안다디 카가자 여러와데
I imagine you've come to see the great importance of cultivating impartiality. See, and if you have already gained some experience of a more impartial attitude, will have experienced how it leads to one having a more open and relaxed and spacious mind, feeling comfortable with whomever one is with. This impartial attitude is something that is essential, as we've discussed, for those aspiring to the bodhisattva paths. But impartiality is also required for those who are not interested in Buddhism, because having an impartial attitude helps one have a more spacious and relaxed mind and be comfortable with whomever one is with. So for such a person who has no interest in Buddhism and certainly has no interest in the bodhisattva paths, how can they think about impartiality? Well, for them too, just like ourselves, to reflect on the impermanence of relationships in this life is crucial and will help ease their bias and their partiality. Because especially in terms of relationships that have turned sour, where once a relationship was close and loving and warm, but now when that same name is heard, hatred arises, or their voice in a crowded room is heard, hatred arises, or seeing them across the street, hatred arises. This is so different from how the relationship once was, where once those same encounters, seeing them across the street, hearing their voice, hearing their name, led to joy arising within one. That relationship is totally soured. So here, for such people in this awful state, what they will be experiencing is that continuously, or whenever they are reminded of this person, hatred, resentment arises within them. And often even when they're around no external reminders of this person, not seeing their possessions, hearing their name, seeing them, or hearing their voice, just the memory of them keeps coming back. And all these associated feelings burn within them. So this is an awful way to live. One's mind gets scarred like this. So here what needs to be done is recall that the relationship has not always been like this, even in this one life. So these will be people who don't necessarily accept past and future lives. So just from this life, remind themselves that this is not how the relationship has always been. There have been many wonderful events previously, and at that time, this person showed you so much kindness and care and did so much for you, explicitly and indirectly were of so much benefit to one. Recall that. You don't need to forget, you aren't trying to forget the harm that later came in the relationship and the harm that was maybe later done in the relationship, but to get a more balanced approach. Because through having a more balanced approach, you can come to see the relationship in a more accurate way, in a way that is more in accordance with how it is. And in this way, you can overcome the mistaken way of seeing someone like once did, as pervaded by good qualities, and also overcome the mistaken way of seeing them now, which is that seeing them as pervaded with faults, and rather see them in a more realistic way. And through seeing them and building familiarity and seeing them in a more realistic way, and gaining habituation with seeing them in a more realistic way, then when seeing them across the street or hearing their voice in a crowded room, hearing their name, calling them to mind, one's emotional response will no longer be negative. One will no longer feel this burning inside when thinking of them, but one's mind will be relaxed and spacious through seeing them in a more realistic manner.
Dine, tanga zugi, da nyamlen jeken, da simjen tamjigi do sanjo kobang tobi chirdo da nga de tyaba chimbi lol ya janjo simje ge nyamlen che chue nyamlen jeken jibai na da nu da ngebar dong tu samdang wa de be jechi mo chagore. Bene jeke dade dine ge koe nöbe jiye de kanga zhiyo di jianyang, juan di jianyang samdang dobe na nga zuliya gidi na dili ya kongro jaya da dang sem jiya dili yungo re. Chizan dine lebe na koli ya ane zewa dan jamba sa ki tu ma re. Chizan dine yanza nga zuge jamze ki tu ma re. Chizan jamze ki ma tu ba na nga zuge lam nyamlen chi tu go ba. Lam nyamlen chi ba la nga zuge jamze ki go go ba. Chizan jamze ki ya la dine ge paji nöbe 지 콜마가 삼바데 마메바 수고 호르바다 진네디레 진네당 저기 게디나 거卷지 삼다도 그 마가바 콩라자다 베 두제 콜자 지 베네 잠머리 코 강아 체네 베하고 좀 선비게 가와 꿈야다 콜야 지 게디나 콩라사야다 지 두샤 삼다도 베네 디 미게버레 되어와 미게버와 제 디바사 거래 진짜 디바사 디기 제부도 둥아 녀아데 마오반다 소소레 둥아 녀고 차고래 제네 인자 나라줄레 디바 사교 말와 진짜 디바 방고 거래 디바 사교 말 디네 인자 디네 삼당 콜리아 녀바냐냐 삼마다체 안데 나마게 소소레 판도 제바 삼다와이나 디네기 아니 콜리아 타지도 두시다위 somebody 마 슈충주어 디네자 아주 삼당어 바디 김체 도지디레 가선 텔레야 콜라야 잠제기 오 잠제기 기투야 레라 용고요 바다 안 소소레 디보마사와다 안디네 용고요 바인자 텔레야 안디네게 삼당에 되게 치모 차고래 제르마.
That segment then was about how those who are not interested in the Buddha Dharma can still utilize the reflections on impartiality and impermanence so as to ease their pain and burden. For those of us, though, who do aspire to the paths of the Bodhisattva, for us it's imperative that we train in impartiality. Because for as long as we haven't developed this basis, the paths of love and compassion and bodhicitta will be blocked by minds of anger and resentment and spite that we hold for others. What we have to overcome is seeing some people as pervaded by faults. Those that, whenever we hear their name, or we hear their voice, or we see them, or merely call them to mind, immediately afflictions arise within us. Immediately seeing them as someone awful, immediately seeing them as an awful person, as someone who brings harm. Because as soon as our afflictions arise like this, we are creating negative karma. We're creating negative karma and therefore further causes to suffer ourselves. Moreover, we're creating causes that serve to block the attainment of the bodhisattva paths. And this all comes about because of relating to these people in a way that is not in accordance with even conventional reality. This is not how anyone exists. People are not pervaded by negativities and faults. So where we see that we relate to some like this, we have to overcome this way of thinking. it has tremendous, it has tremendous potential. How do you say? When we relate to people in this exaggerated negative way, it blocks our development of the paths of bodhisattvas, blocks our development of love and compassion. So therefore we have to make effort with cultivating impartiality so that we can give rise to the bodhisattva paths within ourselves.
Gabrielia ngaso nebe kibene Gabrielia sosle phando yore samchi samda jiro de jiza simjen thamje ngaso le Gabrielia phando mangbu to ya Gabriel nebe ki yor da mangbu ki yor da di ndigi phema to bare di nebe nyua ki bare de phashi ngaso samda na she me de ji she tu me de bene ngaso ji simjen kenguru ji sha she kengo jin ndigi ngala phema to yor be nebe manga ki yor labna Digi payment to yorese laptuya mere, new mangias laptuya mere. Chisan Gewalia, Tommy Mem, Toma Memanza, how to Gewa Borin Le Java Chunzanti, Gabriel, New Mangi or Gabriel Pandoya or Doyer Bada, Ruada. Chisan Simjan Tamjer, Socially Pandoya, what you're a taking a junior Bada. In a dang to do junior, the answer to Daniel Gombe Gabla, and never gig somebody Matawache, Madama. Mata call it Pembigi, socially Pendover the Samdam over. She's not called Ganga Deva, there's a Ganga ticket sometime when Pala, the niggas down to Delio Corona again. There's a Ganga Diatation, some did Palia, and the Zewa Chung to Gorua. The names are done to get Pendover some touch, Pendocheva some down for it. Did it Pendocheva some time when Pali, sometime you were Zewa Giele, Lela Yungore. 지난 주기라 잠재기 오라 잠재기에 그 돈달라 탑람라 땅용 검식으로와 지난 땅용 검식이 지난 팬비게 삼로디 소슬레 팬도 여바디 안에 삼망아 땅고 거래 근데 세델레 네베기 핸디 네베기야 소슬레 네베기야 자고 강아 되겐디 샘제 미디게 수이네 그래서 세델량아 강아 찍어데 니께와가 망할래 판야고 싶도야 지상을 판도 여래서 두섬 땅고 거라 지난 디네 판도 다데 샘젠 바르메 샘젠 디게다 ngô 마신 바 다데 지가 ngô 마신 바 소소게 저와 기니 메르데 깨왕 아마디와 갈리아 판도야 고정할 지 파마 망보시 분자 제용요라 갈레 판도야 고시요라 다데 네베 기힌디기나 깨왕 아마디와 갈리아 판도야 고시요 분자 망보제 가 제와 망보시 제요라 지사 다데 소소게 니엔다 자워다 바르메 샘젠 수디시네 갈리아 판도야 고 제바 짱야 차상 네마 소소 니엔주원 규용화 샤다레 판도 제바 짱야 지사 차상 직벌해샤 선배게 누섬 다바이나 는 저기 한파 잠재기에 레라용 거래지 세상은 저기 땅용검 시리 두치는 삼노다제 심진 자오다 년다 바르미 심진 간에 지메나 차상야 한가는 줄레기디네 konzu기 소슬리아 판도 제바다 되는 제용화 차상 직벌해샤 디잉알에 판도 체제시 디잉알이야 판도야 시라 제민도 세 민도 세상 알이야 판도 제바 직발하시야 선비게 삼다야디 당한저 땅용 공부이네 지선 디네 인자 심전 차자 아니 직발이 맞리도 거라 나도 다들 삼나다가 나도 인디에 소설에 판도 체제시야 삼제 소설을 다들 체들이야 님마시 수준여비긴디기데 판도 제민도 세베 삼라 심다 링와 차다 바르메 심전델다 나래 판도 가죠 말씀이 콜 셈다 링와 차지 이걸 봐 지바다 리투고 말아 제가 디네 장아도 셈전 바르마다 세델이야 수준이 나다 세델에 수준여비기게 나다 세델에 수수도 제와미가 셈전 간에 집이나 셈전 간에 힘바이네 아니 디 야가레 디 두아르스 가면 찍바레샤스 가브리게 다딩알야 판도 야고지요 가브리게 다데 판도 마시나 깨왕아마디와 판도 야고지요 진짜 소슬레 판도바 찍바레샤 삼다바이나 두스다바이나 안세 소솔레 셈젠레 콘줄야 셈나냐와 차다 안 잠재기에 레라 용고로와 진짜 교행기 초대 삼마다와제 인내가 저 연대 초대 삼다 땅 오래제 가서 냠는지도 갑니다.
And to continue then to express explicitly how us as practitioners should relate to this topic. Firstly, the reality is our relationships with beings are not in the way that they appear to us. In that we are habituated to make a mistake of grasping at a relationship as being how it is, how we perceive it to be right now. And how we perceive it to be right now is overwhelmingly influenced by whether we perceive someone else's attitude towards us, their speech and behavior towards us, as being in accordance with our current wishes, what we right now desire. And we allow that to greatly influence how we perceive that person, how we perceive them as a being. So what we find is, if we look at this well, we'll see whether we like someone or dislike them is superficial. The reasons that it's based on is superficial. Moreover, it is unbalanced in that as our desires fluctuate, so too do what we want and expect from others fluctuate. And therefore, how we perceive others, how we relate to others, fluctuates. It's incredibly unstable and has no basis in reality at all. So we need to recognize the role bias plays in our lives. We need to recognize how crazy it is that we judge others so, and how it doesn't have any basis in reality at all. And then, through recognizing this, we then are ready to start to have a more realistic relationship with others. A realistic in the sense of a relationship based with how things do actually exist, in that we can't just look at how others are relating to us right now in terms of the fulfillment of our needs right now. We need to take the relationships we have with others and see them over an expanse of lifetimes. And take the emotion out of the relationship in the sense of whether our needs are being fulfilled or not. And if we think back to the illustration that we started with earlier, or in the previous session, when we observe a mob of kangaroos, there it's easy to see that we cannot point to one and say, you have shown me greater kindness in the past. We cannot do that. And equally, we cannot point to one and say, in a past life, you were particularly awful to me. We cannot do that. If we reflect well on this, we'll be able to readily recall this illustration when we do feel as being more drawn towards some or repelled from others. We need to recall innumerable lifespans, unimaginable life forms, and this inconceivable span of time. And this will start to shake up how we grasp at someone as being an incredible friend, the most awful of enemies. Will start for us to see the fluidity of relationships, and that there is nothing to grasp at as this person is so wonderful, this person is so awful, and the rest don't matter. And really what we need to focus on here too, as aspirants for the Bodhisattva paths, is we've spoken in the meditation about those, they're training first with those that we are neutral towards, and thereafter towards those that we are close towards, and only thereafter to those that we are distant or we dislike. But we have to, in these meditations, be very aware of those that we call our enemies, that those that we dislike, that those that merely calling them to mind, immediately afflictions come. And especially, whether those afflictions are of the attachment class or the anger class, This is a grave danger, but in particular those for whom we feel disregard towards, a dislike for. Those for whom, when we call them to mind, readily resentment and annoyance arises. Here we need to recognize we are in grave danger here. Afflictions are arising, negativity is being accumulated. The causes for our development of love and compassion and gentleness towards all are being severed right now. We have to have a more realistic approach towards all, and recognizing that our relationships with others are very fluid. Moreover, they are very mixed in that with all, no matter how they are treating us right now or how we recall they have treated us over the expanse of lifetimes, life forms, and time, beings have related to us in the widest way possible. And if we focus on the faults of beings, this serves no purpose other than allowing resentment to arise, and anger to arise, and hostility to arise. So whilst beings have shown us harm, if we focus on the kindness they've shown us, we focus on the benefits that their endeavors have brought us, this serves a purpose. It serves the purpose of allowing impartiality to be developed, love and kindness to be developed, tenderness towards all to be developed. So here, in this meditation, we're not trying to ignore reality. We're not trying to ignore that that beings have shown us tremendous harm, and in this life some have done that. But what we're trying to do is focus on the good that those same beings have shown us, that all beings have shown us. Which, whilst we recognize all beings have caused us harm, our focus needs to be on the good they've done to us, the kindness they've shown towards us. Not because that's the only relationship that beings have had with us, but because by focusing on that, we open ourselves up to the possibility of generating, or the certainty rather, of generating a loving attitude towards others, compassionate attitude towards others, a sense of closeness and tenderness towards all. So by focusing on that aspect of relationships that we share with all beings, those that we currently see as strangers, those that we currently see as working against our interest, and those that we see currently as acting in accordance with our wishes, we'll see that there is actually no real basis for discrimination or differentiation between them. These relationships are fluid. They are not certain. They will have continued to change and will continue to change. So we come to see here that due to the impermanent nature of our relationships, there is no valid basis for discrimination. The only thing that we can say is constant is that all beings yearn for happiness. All beings want to be freed of pain and suffering. That is constant. But in terms of the relationships we have with beings, this changes all the time. So therefore in our practice, we focus on the good qualities of beings, recognizing these good qualities in beings, allowing that to dominate us, not focusing on the faults of others. Because by focusing on the good qualities of others, all the paths of the bodhisattvas open up before us. If we allow our mind to be dominated by the faults of others, all that happens is that we continue to remain bound in the suffering realms of samsara.
Alright, 당은 저기 당님 검다데 데니게 삼다이데 다 수시는 삼로 다 제바체 삼로 다 두스치네 검야 두스치네 검야래 제자다 당은 저기 심쟁기 소슬야 네베기야데 삼당교 말세데 가르스네 디 네베기야다 강아테베 삼당웨네 소소 셈데 델이야 마가베 차도 콘트게게 냥아요 진짜 소슬이 녀모바 깨두고래 제자 디네자 소슬이 녀모바 깨나 잠제게야래 강아체 바시치고래 디네자 네베치야고 상을 마당와체 그 소슬이 펜버드게 디네 개왕아마디고 디네 다 개왕아마로 토바 매반 상을야 차르마고 펜버드요래 셈베게 판도도 삼당웨나 소슬이야 콘트게게 말에 아니 녀모바 기게 말에 마게반 소소 디버사게 말에 아니 저쪽에 펜버드게 약보래 삼면도 Palia, Jamjaki, Lela, Yungore, Dine, Zanga Zuguduschene. As on those genet and Jamjak as a Tanim Samdadi, those Comia Samdadere. Then de Jemade, and to that Simjanam Jerangi, Maji Noa set in Maya to Shuyarisha. Zinema at the Rops of Chitishevare, in that in my Dosresha.
Now we've looked at in detail how to meditate on impartiality. So I encourage you to continue in your endeavors to cultivate an impartial attitude, an unbiased attitude towards others. Because this is the basis to generate a tender, close and intimate relationship with all beings, whomever one encounters, to feel an affinity and an affection towards them. And whilst you're engaging in these meditations and trying to interact with others in this way, others will harm one. They will maybe take advantage of you, or treat you in an unwanted way, speak badly to you or about you. So here, I encourage you to utilize these situations skillfully, recognizing that right now this being before you who is acting in this way is afflicted. They actually don't mean to cause you any harm at all. That is not their wish. Their wish is happiness. But their mind is right now dominated by the afflictions, and therefore they're acting in this way. So remind yourself of this. And remind yourself that if you too become afflicted in your response to them, or even if you allow the afflictions to rise and dominate, you will only harm yourself, and you'll close down the possibility of being of benefit to this suffering being. So rather, transform the situation. Remind yourself that this being has shown you so much kindness over lifetimes and has acted in ways that have been served to be of benefit to you, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Their endeavors bring benefit to you. So right now, they are afflicted. They do not mean to bring harm to you. So rather, respond to their harm with wisdom, with care and kindness. In this way, you can transform this potentially harmful situation into the path. So we'll conclude here. Next time we'll continue in the text and we come to the extensive explanation on seeing all beings as one's mother. So we looked at this a few weeks ago in brief, but now we'll come to a more detailed presentation on how to meditate on this. And I encourage you between now and next week to continue in these meditations on impartiality, transforming who we are and how we relate to others. Thank you very much.